The tables have turned. Christianity has gone from a marginal sect to the religion of the Roman Empire. And apologetics finds its most epic practitioners, two of the greatest theologians in the Western tradition, Augustine and Aquinas. I want to talk about these two theologians under the heading of epic apologetics. What do I mean by this? Well, here I'm following my teacher, Kevin Van Hooser. Van Hooser distinguishes between three varieties of poetry: epic, lyric, and dramatic. Epic poetry is grand and sweeping, a story told, as it were, from above. Think of the Aeneid or the Iliad. Lyric poetry, by contrast, is emotional and focused on self-expression. Think of Shakespeare's sonnets, "Shall I compare thee to a summer day?" Dramatic poetry attends to multiple voices and focuses on personal encounter. And just like there are three varieties of poetry, we can also classify apologetics under these three headings: epic apologetics, lyric apologetics, and dramatic apologetics. In this video, we want to talk about epic apologetics. So let's take our first epic apologist, Augustine. Augustine lived in the seaport Hippo, in what is now Algeria. I want to note that while Augustine was well versed in the Western philosophical tradition, he was African. Justo Gonzalez has argued that it is precisely the mixture of African Christianity and Greco-Roman rhetoric that makes Augustine's theology so potent in the late Roman Empire. In this video, I want to look briefly at his two most important works and to consider them through an apologetic lens. The first is one of the greatest texts in Western literature, Augustine's Confessions. The Confessions are an autobiographical account of Augustine's journey to faith and are a prime example of the apologetic value of testimony. Faith is something that we can only really grasp fully from the inside. So how do we help those who are on the outside to see what we see and feel what we feel? Well, one way is by giving them a glimpse of what the world looks like through Christian eyes. And in the Confessions, we see the world through the eyes of a lover, for someone who has tried everything else and has learned that his heart is restless until it rests in God. Here's a small taste of the Confessions. Late have I loved you, O beauty so ancient, so new. Late have I loved you. You were within me, but I was outside, and it was there that I searched for you. In my unloveliness, I plunged into the lovely things which you created. You were with me, but I was not with you. Created things kept me from you, yet if they had not been in you, they would not have been at all. You called, you shouted, and you broke through my deafness. You flashed, you shone, and you dispelled my blindness. That is a powerful statement of what it means to be human, that we are not primarily defined by what we think, but by what we love. And if that's the case, then apologetics cannot just be about defending the faith. It also has to be about discerning and redirecting desire. Early in ministry, someone once said to me, "Don't try changing people's minds. Try changing what they care about." Because things that people care about are what actually orient and move their life. In Confessions, Augustine invites us to consider what it would be like to consider where God is at work in human desire. The second work we want to touch on is Augustine's City of God. In City of God, Augustine takes his account of human desire and works it into an epic apologetic strategy. So here's the context. In 410, Rome falls to Alaric and the Visigoths, and Augustine responds to the fall of the eternal city by writing the City of God. And here he seeks to answer a pagan challenge, and the challenge is that Christianity is responsible for the fall of Rome. In other words, that the conversion of the empire to Christianity is a betrayal of Rome's political history, an abandonment of the ancient gods, and a novel corruption of Rome's political foundations. Let's talk briefly about this important work. Volume 1 consists of 10 parts. Books 1 through 5 engage Rome's political history. Books 6 and 7 engage Rome's religious history. Books 8 through 10 engage Rome's philosophical history. In these books, Augustine relies almost exclusively on pagan sources, with hundreds of citations arguing against the pagan thesis from their own sources. You see, his purpose is not to eradicate or replace his culture's sacred texts, but to reinterpret them and redeem them. His reinterpretation argues that the deepest identity of a city owes not to its historical continuity, but to its moral continuity, especially its quest for justice. He unmasks a deeper story of Roman lust for power, what he calls the lust for domination, the greed for praise and glory. He sees this both in the poets who tell stories of flawed gods as if they are trying to pull the gods down to the human level. And he sees it in the philosophers who are so close to reaching the truth, but fail to reach it because they proudly believe that they can ascend to the divine by their own rational investigations. His point, on your own terms, with your poets and your philosophers, you cannot establish a lasting foundation for justice and peace and goodness. Now in Volume 2, Augustine moves to tell his story, and he tells a tale of two cities. Here's a taste. We see then that the two cities were created by two kinds of love. The earthly city was created by self-love, reaching the point of contempt for God. The heavenly city by the love of God carried as far as the contempt of self. In fact, the earthly city glories in itself, and the heavenly city glories in the Lord. Augustine highlights the contradiction between the all-too-human gods of the poets and the untouchable, ineffable God of the philosophers. And then he says, theology fulfills philosophy. The pagan philosophers erred when they thought that they could reach the divine through reason alone. But we need more than reason. We need revelation. God's revelation through the prophets, and supremely through Jesus Christ. Theology fulfills philosophy. But theology also fulfills poetry. Christ brings a redemption so pervasive that it also fulfills the desires of the pagan poets, not by dragging God down to our level, but by having the God who descends in the incarnation. So note what Augustine has done. In truly epic fashion, Augustine enters the pagan objection, answers it on its own terms, and then shows how the Christian story offers a bigger, better, and more satisfying story for Rome and for the human race. Now, the common thread in both of these works is the centrality and starting point of desire. We can start by exploring human desire, not just the desire for God, but also the desire for justice and peace and beauty. But that doesn't mean that we give desire the final word or the final authority. Our desires must be examined, interrogated, confronted, and challenged by the story that God is telling through Jesus Christ. A story of death, crucifixion, but also a story of resurrection. This means, contrary to ancient poetry or philosophy, we find God not by pulling him down to our level or trying to ascend through our own rational investigations. We find God because God has come down to reveal himself to us. And this story is not less good or beautiful than we could imagine or desire, but better, more beautiful, more satisfying than we could desire or imagine. That's what we learned from Augustine. In the next video, we'll look at Aquinas.